It was a rainy night, the kind that made people want to curl up in bed with a good book and a cup of hot cocoa. But for me, there was no escape. I was in the middle of the most important event of my life. As the grew stronger, I could feel the weight of my past bearing down on me. My ex-husband, Jimin, had decided to show up at the hospital despite our divorce. The nurse, a kind-eyed woman with a soothing voice, guided me through each. "You're doing great, honey," she said, patting my hand. "Just a few more, and you'll meet your little one." I glanced over at Jimin, sitting awkwardly in the corner of the room. His face was a mixture of emotions, curiosity, fear, and perhaps even a hint of regret. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of anger and betrayal. After all, he'd left me high and dry when I needed him most. But then again, maybe this was his way of trying to make amends. As the nurse coached me through another, I felt a pain through my body. And then, with a final, my baby was placed on my chest. It was a girl with a head full of dark hair and eyes that sparkled like the stars. Tears streamed down my face as I looked down at her, overcome with love and awe. "She's beautiful," Jimin whispered, his voice cracking. He reached out a tentative hand to touch her tiny fingers. I wanted to push him away, to tell him to go back to wherever it was he'd come from. But somehow, seeing the tenderness in his eyes, I found myself letting him hold her. For a moment, the room was filled with an awkward silence, as if we were all trying to figure out where we stood. And then, as if drawn by some invisible thread, our hands found each other, our fingers intertwining. "Thank you," I managed to, "for giving me the most incredible gift I've ever known." And as we looked down at our daughter together, fragile bond began to form between us, a thread of hope, and perhaps someday we could find our way back to each other. But for now, all that mattered, the three of us as a family. The nurse cleared her throat, reminding us that it was time to clean the baby and take her to the nursery for her first checkup. As we watched her being wheeled away, I couldn't help but feel a pang of loss. But then again, I knew deep down that she would be alright. She was strong just like me. Jimin lingered for a while longer, asking questions about her feeding schedule and when he could hold her again. There was an awkwardness between us, a sense that we didn't quite know how to act around each other. But as the hours passed, I began to feel a sense of calm wash over me. maybe, just maybe, we could learn to be co-parents. The next morning, the nurse brought our daughter back to me, all clean and swaddled in a soft, warm blanket. As I held her close, I couldn't help but marvel at how much she looked like both of us. She had Jimin's eyes and my nose, slightly crooked from when I'd broken it as a teenager. It was as if the universe had taken the best parts of us and created this perfect little being. "She's beautiful," I whispered to her, kissing her forehead. "You're going to be so loved, sweet pea." I glanced over at Jimin, who was watching us from the corner of the room. His look had taken on a fresh softness that I hadn't seen in quite some time. "You okay?" he asked softly, stepping closer. "Yeah," I replied, my voice still soft. "I am. I was just thinking how much she looks like both of us." He nodded, his eyes never leaving our daughter. "She's going to need us, you know. She's going to need both of our love and support." I took a deep breath, trying to push aside the memories of our past. "I know," I said quietly. "We're going to have to figure out how to do this, you and me." There was an awkward silence as we both tried to process the enormity of our situation. We'd been together for so long, but now we were facing the reality of being parents together, separate from our marriage. It was a daunting prospect, to say the least. "You know," Jimin began, clearing his throat, "I've been thinking about us, about what happened between us, and I want you to know that I'm sorry for everything." I looked at him, surprised by his honesty. "I'm sorry too," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I wish things could have been different." He nodded, meeting my gaze. "Me too. I want us to try, you know, to make this work for her." I felt a pang of hope in my chest. Maybe we could find a way to co-parent and even be friends for our daughter's sake. The nurse returned, ready to discharge us. As we signed the papers and made arrangements for our daughter's future, there was an unspoken understanding between us. We were in this together, whether we liked it or not. And we could learn to trust each other again. As we left the hospital, I couldn't help but feel a sense of overwhelming responsibility. Jimin and I walked side by side, our steps synchronized, even though our hearts weren't. The air was cool and the sky was cloudless, a perfect autumn day. So he began, clearing his thought. I've been thinking about schedules and all that. I mean, we both have busy lives and I don't want to overwhelm you with too much, but I'm happy to help out however I can. I nodded, grateful for his offer. Thanks, Jimin. I appreciate that. We can figure it out together. I'm sure we'll find a way to make it work. We reached my car and buckled our daughter into her car seat. As I turned the key in the ignition, I glanced over at him. You know, we don't have to be friends. We don't even have to like each other. But we do have to do this for her. He nodded, his expression solemn. I know, and I promised I'll do my best for her sake. And with that, we drove away, our daughter sleeping peacefully in the back seat, our futures uncertain but hopeful. As the days went by, we settled into a routine. Jimin would take her on Tuesdays and Thursdays while I had her the rest of the week. And despite our differences, we found ways to laugh and enjoy our time with her. There were moments when the old resentments would flare up, when I'd catch him looking at her and feel a pang of jealousy. But I forced myself to let it go, to remember that we were in this together. And somehow that knowledge made it easier to breathe. One particularly sunny Saturday, I had her for the weekend. We were at the park watching other families picnic on the grass, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy. I wanted that again, the kind of normalcy we had once shared. But then I looked at my daughter, laughing as she chased a butterfly, and I knew that I couldn't go back. As we left the park, I decided to take a different route home. I drove past our old house, the one where we'd spent so many happy years together. It looked the same as it always had, but something was different. The grass needed mowing, and there were toys strewn about the yard. I realized then that it wasn't our house anymore. As the days went by, I found myself looking forward to our visits, not just for the sake of our daughter, but also for the chance to spend time with Jimin. We didn't talk about the past or the future. We didn't discuss our feelings or our regrets. We simply focused on her. And in that simplicity, we found a sort of peace. One afternoon, as we were putting her down for a nap, Jimin leaned against the door frame, watching me. You know, he said, his voice tentative. I think she's lucky to have two parents who love her so much. I smiled at him, feeling a rush of affection for this man who had once been my husband. I think you're right, I said, reaching out to take his hand. She really is. And in that moment, I knew that we could finally become the parents our daughter deserved. As the seasons changed and the holidays approached, we found ourselves planning parties and outing together. We would exchange texts throughout the day, discussing what our daughter had eaten and how long she had slept. We would share pictures of her first steps and her first words. We were, in a way, a family again. Not the perfect family we had once dreamed of, but our own unique version. And as we celebrated her first birthday surrounded by friends and family, I looked at Jimin and saw him in a new light. Not as the man who had betrayed me, but as the father of our child. We were no longer two separate beings, but rather we were a team. A team dedicated to raising our daughter with love, laughter, and the knowledge that we would always be there for her. As we cut the cake and sang "Happy Birthday," I felt a sense of gratitude wash over me. Gratitude for our little girl, for the life she had brought into our world, and for Jimin. I reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. Thank you, I said, looking into his eyes, for everything you do. He smiled back at me, a small tear trailing down his cheek. Thank you, he replied, his voice barely audible, for giving me this chance. And with that, he leaned in and, softly and tenderly. It was a moment of connection, of understanding, and of forgiveness. A moment that marked the beginning of a new chapter in our lives, one where we weren't defined by our past, but by the love we shared for our daughter. As the party went on, we danced with our little girl in our arms, laughing at her antics and enjoying the love that filled the room. It was a day that we would all remember for the rest of our lives, not just as the day our daughter was born, but as the day we truly became a family. And as I looked around at the people who had gathered to celebrate this special occasion, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together.